Maureen, thanks so much for coming to my house. I'm really happy that we're going to have an opportunity to learn more about each other and what we do in our careers, even though we've been friends for a long time. I haven't ever really talked about this professionally, so I think this STEMcast video gives us the opportunity to do that.
And thank you for inviting me to the STEMcast. I'll start by asking if you could explain what you do.
Sure. So I'm a patent attorney. And being a patent attorney is a very specific requirements. You have to be both an attorney and really an engineer or some other very specific technical field, like you could be a physicist or a chemist or something like that. So I started my patent attorney career after I finished my law degree and took the patent bar as well as the regular California state bar, which all attorneys take. And then I went to a law firm where I learned to write patents. And that's really what patent attorneys do. That's the bread and butter of patent attorneys, is to talk to engineers about the nifty cool thing that they invented. And usually we like to say they return, some sort of 4-page technical document into a 50-page, legal document. And what do you do, Maureen? I know it's something with water. Probably why you chose to wear blue today. But
I wear blue a lot.
Yeah.
I'm a groundwater hydrologist. I focus on my work on groundwater. I work with city and county governments and working mainly with future water supply. I'm a civil engineer by training, although you can be a groundwater hydrologist through geology or engineering. I'm more on the engineering side.
Okay.
I do pretty much exactly the same as geologists. And what my specialty is numerical modeling of groundwater aquifers. So we figure out how to simulate mathematically groundwater and try to predict how changes in pumping or water supply would affect the natural systems. Well, as you know, we've had a pretty serious drought over the last few years, but last year we had a lot of rain. The groundwater aquifers in most systems act like a savings account. In wet years, we fill it up, in dry years, we bring it down. And we haven't really had that wet year to fill it back up. After the drought, everybody pulled their resources down, pumped a lot of groundwater for water use. And so another dry year is going to make it challenging to meet the water supply demands.
So even though I got snowed in Tahoe because there was so much snow last year, we're still
going to be in serious conditions. And it might be more mandatory water conservation or looking at how to use our groundwater more sustainably. In 2014, they passed a new law called the Groundwater Sustainability Management Act, or SGMA. And now entities are required to show they have enough water to meet demands. A lot of times they don't think in the future about what resources they're going to need. Mm-hmm. And this is specifically the Central Valley has a lot of farming. And people have been able to plant whatever crops they wanted. And they've planted a lot of almonds and alfalfa that use a lot of water. Oh. And they don't have the groundwater to meet that demand. So now everyone's going through and doing numerical models to figure out how much water they actually have, how much water they use, and if it doesn't equal, what they can do. And there's going to be some very tough policy questions. I'm on the science side, so I'm not going to have to decide who doesn't get to grow their crops. Uh-huh. But what we're in the beginning of doing is groundwater sustainability plans, where we're showing what is and what needs to be to support those decision makers as they're making the hard choices.
Wow.
So
that's crazy. Yes. So let's take a little step back, and can you tell me how you got here?
My father is a groundwater hydrologist.
Oh,
but
wow.
He is more on the academic side. He works for the federal government, and he developed some of these early numerical models that I still apply today. But
can you go into a room and be like, hey, my dad
did this? I cite Tom Reilly as the professional hydrogeologist. But when I started, I actually went into information systems. So I worked a lot more in databases and computer programming, and I was all set to have this computer programming career totally separate from what my dad does. When I made the choice to go into civil engineering in grad school, I realized I could apply all the computer programming and the database systems into the groundwater hydrology field, which has been less quantitative.
So what's your undergrad degree?
It was systems engineering, which is now changed to information systems engineering.
Okay.
Title.
Okay, yeah. I don't think Purdue had that one, or maybe they did and I was just unaware of it.
It's kind of like computer science light. Okay. Computer science for business. It's more the application of computer science.
So where does, I'm familiar with industrial engineers. Sort of took a variety of the first level classes in a variety of fields.
So it was
sort of similar.
It had grown from industrial systems. So we
imaginary engineering.
Exactly.
Right. Yes.
And now I do imaginary science.
Sweet.
Numerical simulations. It's all you still use the computer science. I do a lot of database work, because there's a lot of data. Like right now, I'm working on a database of all the municipal pumping in Kern County, trying to figure out who's pumping what, where, when, and the only way to do it is a quantitative database. So it's using those skills but applying it to the natural system. So we'll switch.
Okay.
Because I know you didn't start out in law.
Right. So you can't.
What did you major in undergrad? Did you always know you wanted to do law eventually?
When I was in materials science engineering, they had this great class that was like this 1 credit hour, like you just have to sit there, do whatever you want, theoretically pay attention, but they just had people come in and talk about what have I done with my engineering degree. And one of the people that came in for one of those classes was a patent attorney. And she said, it's really a specific skill set to be good at understanding science and math and engineering and be able to translate that into words. And if you have both of these skills, this is a good career path because there's more demand than there is supply, essentially. I was like, this is me. Like, I was always the person that wrote the lab reports. My dad's a writer and my mom's a librarian, right? I was being very edgy going into the sciences to begin with, right? So, but the English side was always just a given. I took a lot of extra English classes in when I was at Purdue, just for fun, and so it seemed like, this would be such a good marriage of my skills. Like, it worked out really well for me. Because then by the time I did go into law, I knew, like, patent. A lot of people that I was in law school with didn't know what type of lawyer they wanted to be. And there's a big variety there in law. And I came, like, straight into law school being like, I'm going to be a patent attorney. I'm going to join the, IP club. I'm going to be on the IP law journal, and it was very, very focused in law school.
That's great. But it's very interesting to say that you brought the technical skills and the specific skill set of bringing the technical understanding with being able to put into words. It's kind of where I am in my company, because I understand the numerical modeling, but I can also explain it to the board of water supply, the water district general manager, who are not engineers. They're usually, business people, or sometimes they're just people who ran for their local water board and they don't have any understanding. So to be able to break down a really complicated technical thing and say it in plain English is a skill set. And that works for almost any industry. So would you like to move on to the technical portion of the STEMcast?
Sure.
I'd like to know some more details about being a patent attorney.
All right.
Do you have a good anecdote to share about what is patent law?
Sure. Well, I brought some visual aids that I thought would be kind of fun to talk through. So there are a variety of different types of patents, and some of those are easier to show with some visual aids. So let me get those out for you. So a long time ago I did some presentations on what makes a patent, and I have a few examples here that I think are especially interesting and sort of easy to understand. So this one is actually Lincoln logs.
I'm familiar with Lincoln logs.
And we have some Lincoln logs here. So just put them out so you can see them. When I do this presentation, sometimes I like to actually have already built something. But the thing that I think is interesting about the patent on Lincoln logs is that it has some imagery, as you saw earlier, of the different styles of how the Lincoln logs come together, right? So there's the large ones and the little ones.
So it's even like the dimensions. And
it is.
Very specific. Are all patents equally as specific?
No, it really depends on the patent, whether they're trying to get a broad patent on a general concept or whether they're moving to something that is maybe already been patented and is very specific. So I think with the example of Lincoln logs, what you have is somebody came up with a totally new concept for a toy, and they were showing, the house and the side of the house and how you would make that with a variety of different pieces.
So it looks like the patent was 1920?
Yes, so this is out of patent. This is, anyone can make Lincoln logs.
But
that's kind of the point of patents, actually.
How long is a patent active for?
So the technical definition of a patent is that it is a limited term monopoly that is a deal that you, the inventor, make with the government, where you say, I will disclose all of the technical requirements for making and using my invention in such a way that anyone with ordinary skill in the art could reproduce it.
So you're trading your future information for the right to do it, the monopoly right now.
Yeah, and that's why the government is in the business of doing it, right? They want to incentivize inventors to disclose all of the details of their amazing inventions to the world, and they understand that to incentivize people to do that, they need to get something in return. And so what they get is a certain period of time when they're allowed to be the only ones doing it. And actually, it takes quite a while to argue with the patent office to get it to begin with, but the time starts running the day that you file. So it's 20 years from filing, but you probably spend about 5 years arguing about it before you ever get it. This is another one that I like that I have in my presentations. That's the Lego Man, the original patent for the Lego Man. And my son let me borrow a Lego Man here, so I'll pull him out. He's a very specific Lego guy. So that patent...
I was looking at the dates, 1978.
Yes, right? That patent that you're holding is to a traditional Lego guy, right? So no hair and no sword, or wand, I guess in this case probably, right? But it's the
Harry Potter licensing aside.
Yes, but it's the basic concept of these interchangeable parts, and similar to the Lincoln logs here. These are this is actually a design patent. Which means that there aren't a lot of words. So this one, and I'll give you some other examples of utility patents, have a lot of descriptive terminology in what's covered. But design patents are just the specific images from the front and the side and the back, the top and the bottom, and usually a perspective view as well to show exactly
who draws the figures.
So that's like a whole career in and of itself.
Right.
Actually, you can be a patent draftsman. And we use a variety of people. There's one dude I really like who's in Santa Cruz. And
so is
I get the impression he just draws and then goes surfing and then draws.
So he's just like a one-man shop that just does drafting. Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming it's on computer nowadays, right? Yeah. You just get a file.
Yeah.
For your job, the engineers give you something. How much do you need to understand it in order to put it into a patent form?
So my current job, which I haven't really told you as much about, less. But to answer from the perspective of my the traditional patent attorney, you need to understand it pretty well, because what you need to do in general is take what an inventor has said, completely understand the technical details of it, and probably expand upon it in your description in order to cover the space surrounding the patent. And sometimes it's hard to know what is the real nugget of value, or what is the piece that could be litigated in such a way that the judge and the jury, who are non-technical people, are going to understand. So, for instance, my firm did a lot of patents on the iPhone when it came out, and one of the attorneys that sat just right down the hall from me wrote the patent that was on the concept that when you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the screen on your iPhone, it bounces back, right? And we called that like the rubber band patent, right? And we just thought it was kind of silly. And that's the one that they ended up litigating all over the world because I think it was really easy to show infringement. Now I'm director of intellectual property at my company, and so I'm handling the entire portfolio. for KLA-10 core, and we have a lot of different imaging products. Like some of what we do are sort of microscopes that shoot electrons at things, and we measure how they bounce off, and we can get an image based on that. And then we also have imaging systems that use light, and we have imaging systems that use X-rays, and we have imaging systems that look for how the main light bounces off, and we have other imaging systems that only collect what we call dark field, so all the scattered light. And different systems are better at looking for different defects. It's mostly used in semiconductor fabrication. That's really the area that's most interested in these really, detailed images of things. My patent attorneys that write my cases now, they have their own specific expertise. There's a patent attorney that I use for dark field imaging, and there's a patent attorney that I use for scanning electron microscopes, and there's a patent attorney. So you don't have to be algorithms.
You don't have to be the expert on dark. What is it?
Dark field.
Dark field. I can't even say it.
I know, right? Yeah. But I have a board of leaders of those technical areas who get together with me and the other patent attorneys. So I report to Vice President of IP, and so he's always at those meetings where we get together with all of the sort of technical leads, and we go through all of the invention disclosures that have been submitted by engineers throughout the company. And those people in that meeting, are the experts on their various areas, right? I have an algorithm expert, and I have a dark field expert, and I have an expert on the electron microscopes and such. And one of the important things that's going on in that meeting is not only are the experts commenting on the things that are closest to their area, but because we're all in the same room, we're looking for overlaps. Like a lot of times, the people they're so deep in making plasma, or laser sustained plasma light sources, they don't really think about, well, which tool is this really going to be used for? Or they're only focused on the tool,
Rest their objective.
Yeah. And for the rest of us to say, well, that particular light source, maybe we could use in more than one tool, and let's make sure that we write the patent broad enough to cover a variety of tools. And I'm not the one writing. I'm not the one arguing with the patent office, directly. And I'm not the one talking to the engineer directly most of the time, although I do have some meetings with engineers. What do I do? So I'm the point where all these things come together and converge, right? And so I have to have knowledge of all of the spaces, and keep the ship sailing. There should be a very open communication between the technical people and the lawyers in the system in order to really make the strongest product.
Not just the product, but the strategy. Like you're even one step above just the product.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, and it's fun to be at that level where it's kind of where business meets law meets engineering.
Right.
And it's fascinating. It's totally fascinating to me.
Yes, IP law is fascinating.
So why don't you tell me a little bit more about what you do? I mean, I have a lot more things. I'd be happy to show you.
I could have brought my little aquifer in a box. But so what I'm doing now is we just won a big grant from the Department of Water Resources for the San Benito County Water District. We're going to prepare their groundwater sustainability plan. And there's many different elements. The first being the communication plan. We're going to have to communicate to a whole bunch of growers in the Hollister area that water is changing and that they can't just pump as much as they want all the time. Mm-hmm. They get imported water, so it goes up and down depending on drought and everything. And what we're going to do, we're going to be more on the technical side, is we're going to be preparing a numerical model that brings in all the water balance elements to show how the district can manage the water supply. And hopefully this will inform the communication of this is why we need to do this, right? Because just telling somebody you have to stop pumping, they're going to come back, well, why me? Why now? Why? But to show it. And so one of the core pieces is going to be the numerical model. And what most groundwater models are built off is ModFlow, which was a code built in the 1980s in Fortran, and it's still being used. The United States Geological Survey developed ModFlow 20, 30 years ago, and they keep updating it. So there are a lot of pre and post processors that use the original code but make it easier to use with GIS map systems. But what it is, it's a finite difference grid. Lawyer speak, the footnote, not always a grid. Sometimes there's different triangles, but it's easier to think of them as cubes. You have a grid with different layers of a layer cake, and you can assign different properties to each of these cubes.
Okay.
And the whole basis of the numerical simulation is that it compares the head and the parameters of neighboring cubes. And they do so with using Darcy's law. Darcy was a hydrologist in the 1800s, and he developed this relationship to get water from springs in France to the fountains, because that's how they provided water supply to municipalities, is they brought it to the central fountain, and people would get their water there.
Oh, so this is like drinking
water way back when. And what it is, it's a simple thing, is you can figure out the flow, the volume of flow, Q, by the head difference. If water is high and it's going to some place where water is low, it's going to flow faster, right? The higher it is,
water flows downhill.
Right. And the steeper the hill, the faster it flows.
Okay.
And in groundwater, it's flowing through sediment, usually sand and gravel, sometimes clay. But how dense and how permeable that is how much it flows.
Okay.
So you have, your difference in flow.
Faster in sand, slower in clay.
Exactly.
Okay.
I'm done. And with the numerical simulation, they do it with matrices, and it's a very complicated solver, which nowadays is all done by the computer. And because computers have gotten better, those little squares can get smaller and smaller, or now not squares. So
right, triangles.
Triangles, yeah. Which is a big change in our industry. Which I like squares. Squares are nice and easy. And so each element you can decide, does a pumping well go here? Do you have a crop growing where they're applying water and it filters down to the groundwater? So you simulate all these little things that are happening, and then the computer solves the equations, and you get this is what we think the groundwater's doing.
So back to the Darcy guy.
Yeah.
Was he trying to influence, how much water ended up in that fountain in the town square?
Yeah, so he was trying to calculate
building walls, or...
Well, he was trying to figure out what springs and where they would have to be to get the water to the fountain. And I don't think Darcy thought hundreds of years later we'd be using his formula to solve these very, very complex mathematical formulations and using it to determine who gets to grow what, where in California, right? Like, it was like,
Darcy!
And so it's just basic physics.
Right.
And having the mass balance equals each other. And before computers, hydrologists used to work with components like transistors and resistors and conductors and putting electrical current through, because electrical current can work the same way as water, because it's going to flow through, and you can put resistivity in place of a clay,
right?
So you can still calculate it.
Well, that's really fascinating.
So they'd come with a voltmeter to measure it, and nowadays you can do it with a computer, and you can put in a virtual well and see what the water levels. But what gets interesting is because we don't have a lot of information about the subsurface. I don't really know where the sand is. We know, you drill some wells here and there, but there's a lot of connecting the dots, right? Like, I got this well here, and I have that well here, and this well here, and the rest of it is unknown.
Right, you're like, oh, this was mostly sand, and this was clay.
Yeah, so I'm going to connect the dots, draw this in.
I know the water ended up here, so...
Right, and so my geologist co-workers spend a lot of time connecting those dots. I'm an engineer, I just straight line it. That's about right. And so we put it in the numerical model, what we think. And then the model does its magic, and we get what the model says is happening. And sometimes that doesn't match what we think we know, right?
Oh.
One way we calibrate the model is we look at what the water levels are simulated versus what we're observing in real life. Sometimes they're not close at all. And so then we tweak the model, change where we think the sand is, change where we think the water's coming in, rerun it, and then check again. And hopefully those water levels are closer.
So you're like, I know what it is. I mean, it's kind of like algebra, right? I know this side of the form, you know, the calculation, and I know where I end up with, you know, but I have these unknowns in between.
It could be 10, it could be 5, it could be 15. And we'll try a whole bunch of these and see which one works better. And sometimes we don't really know what we know. Like, we have measured pumping, but what if they don't actually measure it properly? They don't measure all the pumping. There's a lot of unknowns, even in the things that we think we understand.
Right.
And there's no way we can possibly know what's going on everywhere. So the reason why I like groundwater is it's this giant puzzle. Because you don't know. Nobody knows. You know, it's not there's no right or wrong in the subsurface, but the numbers do have to equal. So there's this equal part certainty and uncertainty. Which drives me crazy, but then when you get that answer, you put it all together and it works. Ta-da! And it does something that you think it's operating the way you think it should be operating. There's this like, wow, the wow moment.
I did it.
The man who started my company, the reason why I worked for, when I started, it was Todd Engineers, now it's called Todd Groundwater. David Keith Todd was the patriarch. It's the only way to describe him. He was a professor at Berkeley, and then when he retired from being a professor, he started the company. And he was always the expert witness, but he was always so clear. He didn't introduce the uncertainty. He always had this understanding of what the system should be, but his ability to see, yes, there is uncertainty, but what is the bigger picture? What are we trying to do here? And not get caught up in these technical details. Like, that was just, it was amazing to work for somebody like that.
Yeah.
Because he was always so confident, and always so sure of what he was doing, because he had this like larger vision. Right. Where like sometimes I get caught up with, well, that was 2.5 and it should be 2.7, and to step back and have that like understanding of why are we doing this. When I interviewed with the company, my interview with him was a 1 hour over lunch, and he asked me, I played rugby in college, and he asked me to explain the rules of rugby. So the whole time at lunch I just talked to him about rugby, and at the end of the lunch he said, okay, great, you're hired. I didn't tell you anything about groundwater, or like I can do computer programming and I have these great ideas. No, you can explain something complicated simply. That'll be fine. Because in engineering, it was the 4 years in college were solve these equations. These are all your knowns, solve for these unknowns. And then when I got to the real world, even the knowns weren't known, and there's too many unknowns, and it's like suddenly I had to evaluate the information that was given to me. Whereas in college, I never evaluated. I didn't read the word problem and go, well, that guy was wrong.
I don't think he measured that.
Right, yeah. I think that was measured incorrectly. This guy has a different objective and was trying to get us to say something else. But like when you get to the real world, then suddenly there's these other variables that I didn't even consider were variables. That it took me a long time to realize that not all the inputs were real, right? And that other people had different objectives, and to try and figure out what's needed and what's given to you. First, you know, the education I think was it's too cut and dry. It's not as easy as they made it look like.
You know, one of the fun things about school, right, is that they are these, you know, non-real world problems, right? Where they have given you something that is actually solvable.
And in school science and technology, there's always a right answer and you're done. The right answer and you're done. And never okay, let's get it a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better.
Wow, we've covered a lot today. This STEMcast was really fun. So maybe we'll do something similar again. It was great to learn more about you, even though we've known each other for so long.
I was going to say that. We've known each other for so long, but I'm glad I learned a lot more about patent law.
Yeah, and
what you do.
I know a lot more
dark
about
field.
Darcy's.
We have learned a lot.
Cubes.
Constantly learning. That's what our professions are about.
Thanks.